Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Random podcast, our first of 2025. I'm your host, Peter Bauman, the editor-in-chief at Random, and today I'm joined by our team only. So today we have the Funny Guys, who is the co-founder and CEO of Random, and then Conrad House, who is our collection lead. And today, basically what we're doing is wrapping up 2024. We're going to look at some highlights and some of our favorites. And then we're going to also look forward to 2025, some of the things that we expect to see and that we're excited to see. It's going to be maybe a long one. I don't know. Let's see. And we're excited to chat about all this stuff. So let's get started. So I guess we can begin with some of our themes of the year, or some of what our reflections of the year are. And how about the Funny Guys, we kick it off to you. So what were some of your themes of 2024?
Yeah, sure. That's a good question to get started with. I did think about this for a while. I think there's multiple themes we can emphasize, but one that really jumps out to me is just in general, like digital art platforms, either pivoting or expanding into different areas. Some that definitely come to mind are FXhash, which just announced its artist token economy. For me, that feels really like a pivot, like not just like an expansion, but it does really feel like FXhash is becoming a different type of platform than they were before. And really hard for me to predict like what the changes will be, how artists will use these tokens. But yeah, this is definitely happening. The team has announced this, and I'm really excited to see how artists experiment with this. Some other pivots that we've seen, the Foundation team, I wouldn't say they've moved away from Foundation. Like Foundation still exists, they're still maintaining it, but they did release Rodeo, which is very different type of business model than Foundation initially was. And then there's other platforms like Artblocks. They're now focusing a lot more on physicals than they did before. Before, an Artblocks release was typically digital only. Now there's a lot of physical elements involved. And there's also Highlight and Verse, and both of these have really emphasized that they want to move into the direction of a secondary art market. So yeah, for me, that really stood out. Like all of these major platforms in 2024 are exploring different directions. And I think it's hard for us to know at this moment in time what the consequences are. I think that will play out in 2025. But I'm curious what you guys think about these pivots, expansions, how you reflect upon them.
Yeah, I think the FX hash token economy, especially like the artist token economy that they're exploring, is going to be a very interesting idea. I think it will take some time getting used to exactly how artists are going to, I think, take advantage of these kind of token protocols and how they're going to be used to either, I guess, speculate on artist values without having kind of direct, tangible allocations of any works from the artist, rather you just kind of own a token. So I think the implications of that can be maybe a bit tricky to navigate as the things begin, but obviously we haven't seen any come out yet. So it's kind of just a blank unknown field that we're walking into. And then, yeah, I think the Rodeo kind of pivot from Foundation is, I think, a step in the right direction. I think this idea of having a better onboarding process to maybe non-digitally native people that don't have the most amount of money to spend, but they still like digital art sometimes, and they needed a kind of an easier access way of collecting. I think Rodeo does a good job of that. I think the design is pretty good. I think the biggest thing is them having the feature of like you get to kind of upload a certain amount of USD into your wallet, and then you can just kind of click collect, move, scroll, click collect, and you don't have this process of having a new transaction window pop up each time, and then having to click that transaction and approve it. I think it makes the process a bit more seamless, a bit easier to kind of accept and learn from. I do understand. I think some of like the backlash that Rodeo went through for like the past, I don't know, 5 months that they initially kind of came to board, but it seems like they're doing pretty well. It seems like interest in the platform has kind of only grown. I know they had that phrase that they kind of created like the spirit of Hickik Nunk, but with better design. And I think they did capture the spirit of Hickik Nunk to some degree. I think also a lot of the spirit of Hickik Nunk came from kind of the clankiness and like the roughness of the platform. Like you had to go through a lot of obstacles of like loading issues. The platform was never open all the time. Your transactions weren't approved all the time. And I think that was kind of the spirit of Hickik Nunk, where like, yes, you had low priced art at the same time that you could collect from a lot of amazing artists, but it wasn't as like pretty and well put together as Rodeo might be. But I do think that pivot is, I think, going in the right direction. We went through this mania of 2021 and even kind of higher prices of 2022. And I think trying to look for ways that we can still appeal to a broader audience and allow them to come in without having to, spend hundreds of dollars on transaction fees or whatever it may be. And just giving them a little bit of taste of like, hey, these are some of the artists that are creating, get a better feel for collecting and see what you like and see if you want to maybe take a deeper dive after Rodeo.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think both of what you said, the funny guys, what you were saying about like platform pivots, and Conrad, what you're talking about Rodeo, they both seem to me like symptomatic of just market conditions and people needing to search for ways to survive and ways to continue until hopefully markets improve, and that's actually leads to at least like what I thought was one of the major themes of this year, which was kind of these dual themes of market struggles, but also with institutional and museum acceptance of digital art. So the market was struggling, but there was this institutional acceptance at the same time. And I thought that was really interesting. So like Rafael Lozano Hammer, when he spoke to us about the 2020s, he described the era as the normalization era. And I feel like 2024 has definitely been a culmination of that. And we had exhibitions throughout the year. Probably the most significant one was Electric Dreams at Tate's. It's one of the top 10 most visited museums of the world. And now for 6 months there, for half the year, there's going to be this major historical exhibition on digital arts history. I think it's really important. Another really important one was Getty's PST. And that was so many different exhibitions throughout California and Southern California. And I think really massive in scale and important in terms of its reach and impact. And then there was also Electric Op at Buffalo AKG. There was Pompidou's Molnar retrospective. The Whitney had the Cohen retrospective. LACMA had Digital Witness. Musée d'Orsay got into NFTs and digital art with what they're doing with Agoria and Tezos. MoMI had the Aria exhibition that Regina put on. V&A had their digital art book that came out. They also hosted VimGen, which we'll talk more about, and I spoke at. These major museums around the world are turning and looking at digital art for maybe the most that they've done ever. And so I think that that's important to note for 2024. But interestingly, in contrast to that is the fact that not only is the more like Web3 based space, not only is it struggling, and again, I think we've seen that through all the different kind of pivots that these galleries and these platforms have had to go through, but also the traditional art space is struggling. So a lot of commercial galleries are closing. Art fairs have struggled this year with lower sales. Frieze is up for sale. Auction houses have struggled this year. Sotheby's had to be saved basically by Abu Dhabi's sovereign wealth fund. So it's these struggles coupled broader art market struggles that have also been related or possibly unrelated, but coincided with these Web3 digital art space struggles that are then in contrast with institutional acceptance, which to me, I think that's a really interesting and dynamic year for 2024.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Peter. I think it's quite interesting, like the market itself, like definitely a bear market. Like it was a really tough year for platforms, artists, possibly also for collectors. But when we look at the institutional side of things, I would definitely say it was maybe a bull market for digital arts. Like these are exhibitions we could only have dreamt of a few years ago. And for me, like that's probably what makes me really excited, like heading into 2025. Like on one hand, we have the crypto space that is maturing. Blockchains are scaling. Ethereum L2s like now process like sometimes hundreds of transactions per second, and platforms are taking advantage of these like increased technological innovations. And Rodeo is a good example of that. Like Rodeo might actually bring hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of users into Web3. They might start appreciating digital ownership rights. They might start engaging with digital culture in a totally different way than they have ever done before in the Web3 world. But then at the same moment, there's also this institutional acclaim. There's all these exhibitions that people can look to. There's Tashon that produced a fantastic book that they released earlier this year, solely dedicated to NFTs. So if we can onboard these people to digital ownership, and then we can also show them like, look, there is institutional recognition of digital art. I hope, well, yeah, I'm very hopeful we can onboard new collectors to the space who will maybe in the future become serious digital art collectors. So yeah, looking into 2025 and ahead, these factors can combine in a super interesting way to make the space grow.
Yeah, I think what the funny guy says was like, it's a big year of like maturing. I think especially in like the digital collector market, it's a big year of maturing. I think this is also something that we saw kind of towards the tail end of like 2023, because I would say that 2024 is probably a slightly better market environment than 2023 was. I think we saw a few more things rebound, especially towards the end of this year. This could also just be in correlation with crypto prices doing better at the end of the year. But there is, I think, a lot of mature people collecting now. I think people don't have to be so spontaneous as they used to be when they were collecting, and they can actually spend these past few years to understand and research the artists that they're collecting and the works that they're collecting a bit more. And a lot of these institutional kind of shows allow people to take a deeper dive and have a better understanding for why things are where they at today. I think Aria's show at MOMI that you mentioned, Peter, was like a great kind of showcasing of just how amazing Aria is. And I think everyone that visited that show came back with like huge praises for Aria and the entire team at MOMI for how well put together that show was. And I think it really ignited a lot more interest in her work even after that. She kind of had the spotlight on her, which is amazing to see. So I think a lot of these institutional shows, whether that's Electric Dreams or Electric Op, really can, I think, educate a lot of these newer collectors into kind of realizing that what they're doing nowadays in the digital space can be a lot really important in the future. So I think as we mature, we start to see certain artists really excel. I think this is something that we've talked about many times in the previous years or even previous months, but like the hardcore digital collecting group really finding niche artists that they really enjoy and they gain a lot of support. I think we always talk about the EFAN index or the European Fine Art Index, which is somewhat of a meme in the crypto art space, but it really is like a strong indicator of some artists that are like truly digital, that truly have a really hardcore following and supportive group that will kind of stick with them, understand their work, and really kind of support their work through and through. So yeah, I think a big year of maturing is a good thing to kind of highlight.
Yeah, definitely. I think that we feel the space has matured, but I think that perception from outside will still take time to be, or like to manifest or to be observed. Yeah, especially with Justin Sun's acquisition of the comedian. I think like when the rest of the art world kind of looks at that and then doesn't, and sees that it's from a crypto buyer and then doesn't necessarily always take that seriously or thinks that crypto buyers are not very serious or only in it for the fun. But yeah, I think this year did demonstrate that there has been maturity in the more like Web3 or however you want to phrase it, collector scene. And we did mention a couple of exhibitions already, but maybe we can move on to our next main topic, which is exhibitions of the year. So does anybody want to jump in with their favorite exhibition of the year? It could be anything, could be an online one, it could be an in-person one, could be anything really. What is your exhibition of the year?
I guess this is probably on the list of all of us here, but I just think that I guess I'll call it the electric exhibitions, both Electric Op and Electric Dreams from the Buffalo AKG and the Tate, respectively, were really incredible exhibitions. And I think what really well put together and highlighting, I think, some of the most important artists that maybe don't always get the spotlight. So seeing those two shows come together really right around like the same time was pretty awesome, and kind of across kind of both areas of the world. It really felt like the pinnacle to the end of the year to some degree. Like I think both two shows were really highly anticipated. It was kind of, I think Tate mentioned how much work kind of went into putting this together, and same with Buffalo AKG talking about how much work went into putting this together. So I think those two were kind of the highlights of the year. There's so many else that also happened throughout the year that you mentioned earlier, Peter, but those two kind of stick out as the two big finales of the year to me.
Yeah, I totally agree. Peter and I also had the pleasure of going to the opening of Electric Dreams. It was also like the atmosphere at the opening was also very electric, pun intended. It was a good exhibition. It was really awesome to see that the Tate's like such a powerhouse in traditional art worlds, that they really so much effort into contextualizing digital art. And how I look at these exhibitions again is that they do a lot of the let's say the groundwork of establishing like these narratives, these foundations that help us contextualize like what is happening in the NFT space, what is happening with digital generative arts. I think these are super important for our space to mature. I also wanted to add another exhibition to the list. It's not from the traditional art world. It's a very digital native one, World Computer Sculpture Garden. I'm sure you guys are very familiar with it. For me, this exhibition is so interesting because it shows, I think it provides some type of blueprint for other artists to really use the blockchain as art material, as 113 likes to call it. It shows how you can go beyond like using the standard token structures, that you don't have to only use NFTs. Like you can play around with the protocol itself. Somehow it's a return to the roots. I think in the early days of crypto art, artists such as Ria Myers, who was also part of this exhibition, they were always playing like with very like the core of the protocol structure. But then platforms came around, and in 2021, when there was like a really big influx of digital artists into the NFT space, a lot of them were using like these shared contracts from OpenSea or Foundation. And I think over the last years, we have gradually seen artists like migrate away from that and really take control over their own smart contracts, over how they want to present their work in the NFT space. World Computer Sculpture Gardens, the culmination of that trend. And I think it will influence a lot of other digital artists to be very intentional with how they present their work on the blockchain, with what token standards they use, whether they even need to use a token standard or not. What do you guys think of that exhibition?
Yeah, I think I agree with all your points a lot there. And I think kind of the exploration of more like on-chain protocol or kind of contract-based art only makes sense to kind of have contract-based exhibitions. And I think the idea of like multiple people can kind of come together and work on this exhibition together, since it being kind of this open, decentralized space, is a really interesting idea. And we see people like Matto, who's kind of having like an ongoing project within it, where like this project can keep being added to and the exhibition can kind of still be refreshing. I think the most interesting part is it's really not just like one kind of curator that's like controlling all these artists in a way and like controlling which works are like kind of being put in, but like all the artists are coming together to be like the curators themselves with World Culture Garden. And I think the write-up by Malte is really an incredible write-up about the exhibition. If you haven't had the chance to read it, I highly recommend it. And just overall, I think it really feels kind of like a cornerstone piece to like what is going to eventually be built on, I think, what we always talk about with like Ethereum based art, and like really kind of take advantage of like this decentralized system in these contracts and what you can do with them, and creating new experiences that are maybe feel a bit abnormal since we're not used to like art being presented this way, but it feels really true to the nature of the space that we live in. So I'm hoping that we see more kind of exhibitions like this, more contract-based exhibitions, and really kind of the term on-chain maybe gets used a bit over much, but I think it's a good time to explore it a bit more. And I think as we kind of get into I think outside of the mania year and how we talk about how it was kind of a low year for the economy, I think it gives a lot more people a lot more time to think about how they present their work, and that extra time to be more thoughtful about what is being presented can really lead to I think better products and better experiences for the art.
Yeah, no, I mean, what you guys said about World Computer Sculpture Garden, I definitely agree that it's I'm happy you guys brought it up and highlighted this project. It's an interesting use of protocol art, and one of the first people that I know to start talking about protocol art was Matt Dryhurst, and one of my favorite projects of this year was his and Holly's Harry Mutant at the Whitney Biennial. So I just thought it was cool because it was generative AI, but it was a way for the public to see it in a way that was more custom and that was more creative, and that wasn't. I hope it maybe showed people that generative AI is more complex than what it can be, than how it can be portrayed, I guess, typically in the traditional art worlds. So that was one of my favorites. Another one was Mudam, the museum in Luxembourg. They had their radical software exhibition this year, and I just thought it was really good. I thought the catalog was really well researched. These exhibitions that are focusing on something like surveys of history from a certain perspective, this has a feminist perspective. I think that they can be powerful when they unearth scholarship, and that they unearth artists, and they contribute to a greater and better understanding of history and women's contributions to the history. So I thought it was really important for that, and also I just learned a lot from it. And then of course I very much agree about the electric dreams and electric op shows. We had conversations with artists from both of those shows, and then also had a conversation with Val Tate's curator for Electric Dreams as well in our editorial section. So I think those are probably the quote unquote answer, but happy we got to talk about a few other projects as well. So that maybe goes to the third topic, which is our favorite projects of the year. Conrad, do you want to start with your favorite project?
I think this also kind of ties in with our favorite exhibitions of the year to some degree. At least some of mine do. I think when we talk about kind of online exhibitions, I really liked what Fellowship did this year. I really like what Fellowship has done over the past couple of years, but specifically this year with their exhibitions of Linda Dunya's Garden series and Echo 33's Latent Ink were really well put together. Linda Dunya's was really a highlight of her career, by kind of showing the process of her garden series study, where it kind of goes through the different generations of AI tools and software that she uses, and you can kind of see the evolution of AI through these 5 separate generations within her work. So you see like the very early GAN outputs all the way kind of going to some of the newer like text to image models. And it was a really lovely series, and I think the way that it was put together and presented was really awesome. I think Fellowship has done an amazing job at presenting work in the best ways. And I think this really shows kind of just how the responses of these exhibitions go. They also had obviously Infinite Images by Matt Dryhurst and Holly Herndon, which was also another amazing kind of showcase and bringing to light some of like the past important AI works and giving them more context in kind of today's space. And then besides that, I think my favorite is probably Plus Graph from Ferrophile, which is obviously the sequel to Minus Graph, which was always an exhibition I think that especially the funny guys and I always spent a lot of time looking at. We've spent years trying to hunt a complete set from that exhibition. So when they announced Plus Graph, it was really, I think, kind of the the best present that we could have had, because it was something that we had already hunting for in Minus Graph. So kind of seeing this exhibition get renewed with a lot of the same artists. I think the only artist that didn't come back for Plus Graph was Tyler Hobbs, but everyone else was still there. And it was really this amazing focus on plottered works, intertwining of like plottered physical pieces with software pieces was really amazing. I love how you can kind of explore the algorithm within the software digital piece, but then you also have a kind of this direct single physical output. And seeing kind of all the artists and the different ways that they kind of take use of the plotters is really awesome. And still to this day, I think we collected 3 of the sets for the random, and it's still some of my favorite pieces that we collected all year from everything.
Yeah, I definitely echo your favorite picks, Conrad. I think all of these are definitely fantastic projects. And I'm really happy that we got to collect quite a few of them. I do want to add some other projects to the list as well. One of them, I think actually this was released on the 1st of January, 2024, or at least that's when we minted ours. But Genomes by Seibert and Alexander Mortvinsev. I think in general, a major theme for 2024 is definitely artificial intelligence arts. I think AI arts, very often it consumes a lot of power, a lot of resources, and it doesn't always lead to very interesting or innovative visuals. But when Genomes came out, like I was really, really intrigued by the visuals themselves, but also that these were like these small self-contained systems that produce lifelike creations, but without using a lot of computational resources. Like these are very small, very minimal computer programs, but the complexity that comes out of them is surprising and can really keep a viewer engaged for a very long time. So I think in general, this is a project that deserves a lot more recognition. At the time of speaking, I believe you can still collect one for $100 US. Not financial advice. Definitely one of my favorite projects of the year. And then I also want to highlight 2 other, well, maybe not projects, but maybe more artists. Travis Smalley this year, he released Growl on Feral File, also Fell Clouds on Verse. There was also Eric Swan, who released Autoscope on Verse. And I think, or at least for me, like these 2 artists are going or seeing like a similar progression. I think we all know like their first projects, Farb Tyler by Eric Swan on FX Hash, these like 2D color fields. Travis Smalley with Pixel Rugs became notorious in the early Higat Noom days. And I really like where these artists are taking their creative direction. And they're going from these 2D, like color-based works, like really into an interesting direction of interactive worlds. With Crawl, like Travis Smalley, like really brought his passion for video games into that project. It's an interactive world that people can explore, where artworks can be dynamically interlinked. And same with Eric Swan, like he started with these quite simple color fields, but Autoscope is an architectural project where you can really see like his roots as an architect. And again, it's also interactive, like people can explore this landscape. For me, like these artists these projects deserve a shout out in 2024. I was really happy to see them come to life.
Those are all really good choices. I guess for me, I think my number 1 favorite project of the year was The Call by Holly Herndon and Matt Dryhurst, which is at Serpentine Gallery in London, and that I was lucky enough to get to see. The reason I think it's an interesting show is it's very much an AI show. It's very much AI artwork, but there are no screens. It's done in, I think, a way that is asking some of the more interesting questions about AI, which is, I think, questions about authorship and agency and autonomy in generative systems, which is something that I recently wrote about at Laurandom. And I was talking to Matt, and partly for that piece, but partly just like was curious, and I asked him just like, what do they think of Holly Plus? Like, do they think of it as a collaborator or as a tool, or how they kind of thought about it? And The Call doesn't really have anything to do necessarily with Holly Plus, but I think it's indicative of some of the questions that they're asking. And so Matt described Holly Plus as a digital twin, in a sense, a surrogate. So I just think what they're doing and what artists like Sugwen Chung are doing, I think they're just asking really interesting questions. They're also typically conceptually rich, but also they really nail the presentation as well. So if you are in London or around London, I definitely recommend checking out the call or going to the call. It's free.
Yeah, I think that piece really stands out, especially the article that you wrote about it with Matt. I think it was Matt Dryhurst on Becoming Infinite, and really kind of, I think another topic that we talked about a bit this year is kind of the religious undertones of some of like the digital art that we are, like the spiritual undertones, and I think that was really highlighted in this piece. And I think there's a quote or a line by Matt Dryhurst in that article that you wrote, Peter, where he talks about how kind of AI is just an aggregate of us. It's this bigger thing than us, and they're really trying to showcase that through like these kind of religious kind of sculptures in a way. And I think that really was, and I think that kind of show happened right around like the discussions that we're having as a team with this topic of like religious and spiritual undertones in digital art. And this kind of show just happened to appear right around that time, and it was really awesome to kind of have that article that you wrote about it and really get Matt's direct take on it and really get an awesome insight into like why they were doing some things, why they structured things the way they were. And yeah, I think that's a big highlight, especially in like the non-digital space in terms of projects or pieces from the year.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that conversation with Matt and getting to talk to him about that project. And another thing I really love about the project is that it's interactive. So one of the rooms, there's different components, and one of the rooms is where you get to interact with the model. You get to seeing in it, there's a choral response. And I think that's the kind of AI work that could only be done with AI and could only be done really recently with AI. And then they've created this system that was bespoke based on traveling all over the UK and sampling choral singers. It was just really complex, and it's something that will again kind of might change people's minds about how complex and interesting just quote unquote AI work can be. I mean, you can't. Yeah, I don't know how you can look at that work and not be impressed and not. It makes you think about just what this will only enable in the future and everything else that's coming. And then one more thing I wanted to add about my favorite projects. It was the Bright Moments finale mega mint project that had, 60 or 70 artists on one contract. And I mean, it was kind of like, it was sort of silly and gimmicky, but I also just, in the end, I thought it was really fun that they got all these artists together and they all made their own work. Since it was the Bright Moments finale, it was a bit of kind of a retrospective and kind of a reflective moment. And so to me, that algorithm kind of summed up Bright Moments as the institution that it is and was over its traveling years. And so I thought that was another one of my favorite projects.
I think that's a really good shout out to Peter, is that whole finale project. Specifically, I think highlighting the MP Cause selection from that collection was something I think that the entire team really gravitated towards. I think as soon as we saw the first kind of outputs or even work in progresses that Michael began to show, we were all kind of in our, like, I think separate chats, like, wow, like, have you guys seen this? Like, this is incredible. And I think Peter obviously talked to Michael about that project, and learning kind of how Michael created that in such a short period of time was kind of mind blowing, and that being really like a highlight of the piece. And then I was also, it's kind of funny that you bring up Bright Moments finale, because I think talking about the call with Matt Dryhurst and Holly Herndon, they also had not a part of like the final series digital collection, but they had Dream Cathedral during Bright Moments Venice, which was the kind of interactive project by Human and Ganbrud, where they had a very well put together screen in this large Italian cathedral, and they had a microphone, and you can kind of go in and speak a prompt into the microphone, and the screen would kind of automatically adjust and change to whatever prompt that you spoke into this microphone, and have this very aesthetic theme around kind of religious components and compositions. In that same cathedral, we also saw Ganbrud with his kind of Jesus portrait, and it was really this incredible kind of space of this very historical religious cathedral, but also kind of intertwined with today's like digital creations, and just kind of seeing the response from people within kind of the Dream Cathedral piece, like going to visit it every day and seeing kind of groups of like these older Italian men or Italian women that were like really enamored by the piece and like spending 15 to 20 minutes at a time just like sitting in front of the microphone and talking into it and watching it change. And just, I think that being a really neat introduction of like how these systems can be used to create more interactive experiences, more immersive experiences that are maybe directly tied to you, the art changes with you, I think is a really interesting idea.
Yeah, I also totally agree. It doesn't even feel like 2024 for me, Bright Moments, Venice. It already feels a lifetime ago. I really hope in 2025 we see, maybe not call it a comeback because Bright Moments still exists, still out there, still very, very present in the digital art fields. But I do hope to see more Bright Moments events in the new year because it would be such a miss for the digital art space if that's not the case. When I hear you describe, Conrad, the MP Goss piece, it sounds like that might be one of your favorite acquisitions of the year, or definitely a piece that stands out that you remember very fondly. Are there any other pieces that you look back on and think these are some of my favorites that we managed to acquire this year?
Yeah, when it comes to favorite acquisitions, I think the big highlight is the commissions that we did this year. I think that was a big goal for the team this year, was to kind of have a better direct relationship with artists, acquire work that we really love from each artist, spend more time diving into an artist's past work, finding what we love the most, and then maybe going to them directly and being like, hey, how can we bring this into the collection? I think that was a really fulfilling experience. We had a lot of commissions that were incredible with John Maeda, Sean Provencher, we had Lovid, Anna Maria, Maria Myers, Vukosic, Soyo. The list was really incredible that we were able to accomplish this year. But I think out of those commissions, one really stood out, and that's Deep ASCII by Vukosic. This was a piece that the team had talked about for a long time. It was initially presented at Phillips a few years back in an auction and sadly didn't sell. And we were always really interested in the piece, and we kept in touch with Vuk and kind of the people around the work in terms of acquisitions. But there was always kind of like this gripe of this is just a video output of the initial software piece that was created. It was only a minute long output of the full length 59-minute film, and we really wanted to kind of push towards bringing that piece back to its full, like its former glory of a full software piece. And this was a really awesome experience that we got to do with eventually bringing the idea to Vukosic, saying like, hey, you have all the previous kind of historical archival Java versions of the software. Do we think that we can maybe try to port this to a modern day JavaScript, have it run in like a web element? And obviously with the help of the amazing Andreas Geisen, we were able to get this done. And that whole process took months, but it was a really, again, I think fulfilling process where each of the kind of people that came together to help work on it. We had people that were helping with kind of the contract minting process with Ben Strauss from like the Transient Labs team. We had Chris King from Clever NFT helping with kind of the IPFS hosting of the piece, since this was really kind of a large scale piece with the initial kind of text input file being multiple gigabytes big. Yeah, eventually it all came together into one cohesive software piece that you can explore the entire 59-minute film with kind of newer tools that help you kind of traverse the process by fast forwarding and rewinding. And it was really kind of an aha moment to finally see it minted on chain in kind of its full version. It was really an exciting experience for us. It was always a piece that we knew was really important and really got it in I think the perfect form.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I couldn't agree more that Deep ASCII is probably as someone who's not as directly involved with the collecting, or isn't directly involved with the collecting, it was the piece that I could tell that I think, Conrad, you probably spent the most time on, and yeah, it seemed to kind of be a culmination of all your experience and also just consulting different artists and resurrecting a piece from the past. I mean, it really showcased everything that Lorandom does. So yeah, amazing job on that. Another favorite of mine was Florata by John Maeda. I think another kind of consensus favorite for the team. Maeda's Florata, just in terms of the art history and generative art history, I think Florata is hugely significant. And then another just really interesting acquisition this year was Box Braid Study #1 by Minea Tairu. So that work is just another example of generative AI that I think is complex and interesting, and is actually it's part evidence, it's part telling a story, it's part critique. So it's rich and complex, and I also think it's visually stunning. So that was kind of my under radar favorite, but those other two I think are some of our big achievements of the year.
Yeah, I totally agree. For me also, like Deep Esky and Florada, I think both of them are top 3 acquisitions for the year. I would personally also add Utility Stream by Bodo to that list. For me, that's also a top 3 acquisition. It was definitely the most expensive acquisition that we made in 2024. Like that's in line with the progression of Bodo and how well Bodo is doing and how it has really managed to capture community's attention for many years now. And we already had collected quite a few Mario Klingemann works. Heading into 2024, getting a Genesis piece from Bodo was definitely a goal for us. And with Utility Stream, for me personally, it's one of my favorite Bodo Genesis pieces. Just visually, I think it's really attractive piece, and I'm really happy that we have it in our collection. Some other pieces that I wanted to highlight. Yeah, I want to double click a bit on the commissions that Conrad mentioned. We did do many commissions this year. It was definitely the year of commissions for our team. Our space in general, I would say, is very much North America and Europe dominated, also male dominated to some extent. And one artist that brings a very refreshing view to generative art is Soyo from South Korea. I think in South Korea, she's quite well known. Like she often takes over billboards in the city of Seoul, where she showcases her generative work. She's involved in a lot of local community projects, like local exhibitions. But to the wider generative art space, I think she's mostly unknown, or maybe only known by a small subset of collectors. And yeah, I think her work deserves a lot more attention. I think she brings a very unique style to the work with vibrant colors, very interesting animated moving works. My particular favorite of hers is her redraw series, where she reinterprets masterpieces in her distinctive style, and she really brings them to life like through these generative techniques. So I'm really happy that we got to acquire some pieces directly from the artists. And then one more commission I want to emphasize is our Schwidlik commission. Marcel Schwidlik is such an interesting artist. He's quite a young artist from Germany with such a deep respect and fascination with the history of generative art. And we have had the opportunity to visit his studio where he has all these old vintage plotters that he collects himself, that he often restores himself. And in the commission, well, no, actually, I think it was outside of the commission, but we acquired 3 pieces from the series composition number 86, It Is What It Is, where instead of attaching a pen to the plotter, Marcel attached a green laser point to the plotter, and he draws with this laser point on light-sensitive paper, which results in just fascinating generative artworks. So yeah, that was definitely also a highlight for me, collecting works directly from Marcel Schwidlik.
Do like the highlight of commissions here, and I think what Peter mentioned with Florada, and I think what Jan mentioned with Soyo's commission of the entire redraw series and a few other kind of sketches were really incredible. And I think one thing that the Funny Guys mentioned also is that like the Soyo kind of appreciation in the broader space isn't all there, but it was really amazing to see like after the commission, at least a small bit of like renewed interest in her work, and seeing a few other like collectors that we really appreciate reaching out to Soyo after our commission and asking for similar works, and that was really cool to see. It's always nice to know that like the commissions that we can bring forward can help bring, I think, more eyes to artists and things that we also enjoy.
Really good mentions as Soyo and Marcel. Next main topic is a fun one, is the maybe the main event of the evening, but we're putting it in the middle. So that would be our artist of the year. I have kind of 3, but one, again, that's maybe my quote unquote answer, I guess. But yeah, so I'll go first. I think my probably quote unquote real answer is Holly and Matt. I just think that they've done a lot this year, from the Whitney Biennial and then the call, from some of their features. They're really good representatives of the space. Matt is one of my favorite thinkers. And then, I mean, Holly is such an amazing artist and musician and creative. I think just combined, they are, I'm really happy that they're the two people that seem to have broken through this year, because I think it couldn't have happened to people more deserving. And then probably my second one is Lawrence Leck. So he's also somebody who he's probably dabbled in NFTs less than Holly and Matt, but he was on the Time AI 100 list this year. He was Freeze's 2024 Artist of the Year, or he won their Artist Award for 2024. So Lawrence does these AI films. So he doesn't really use AI as a tool, but AI is the kind of the black hole that all of his work swirls around. And from a conceptual and complexity and richness level, I think that his investigations of AI are some of the most interesting. And so his Guanyin show, I think, was really interesting. And so I had the fortune to speak to him earlier this year, and we had a piece that came out. And then probably my third is Samia Halaby. She was just, she had a great year. Obviously, she's had a very long career, but yeah, she broke out this year in a lot of ways. Her work was in Tate Modern's Electric Dreams. She was at the Venice Biennale. She was at Mudam's Radical Software. She was at Freeze London. She was at Art Basel too. So she was everywhere this year, and I think for good reason. And I really love her work, her Amigo work, and also got to chat with her for Lorandom. So those are kind of three of my artists of the year. What about you, Conrad? What do you think?
That's a really good list. And it's kind of hard to follow up on that. But I think one name that does definitely stick out for this year is Raphael Rosendahl. I think specifically with his MoMA screen that he has ongoing now is really interesting. And then also being part of the LACMA Digital Witness exhibition at the moment with another kind of large screen installation is really incredible. And just kind of touching back on like the large MoMA installation, it's really interesting because we saw Rafik Anadol have that same screen for a long time before Raphael Rosendahl. And I think it's a really interesting contrast going from Rafik's really, I think, complex data, like large data set, AI visualization work, to something that's very minimalist with Rosendahl's is really a nice contrast. I think it kind of showcases both sides of kind of this digital creative space that we live in. And it's really awesome to see kind of Raphael's entire selection of what he calls the new Raphael work being shown with multiple projects from that series, because that was kind of an ongoing project that he was releasing kind of just on his own time. He was just doing it on himself. He wasn't getting any help with promotion of the series. He had this website. Every few weeks, he would upload a new project, really small edition, something between kind of 14 to 30 on each of these. But they're really nice Rosendahl works, very minimalist, very geometric, all on chain. And this was kind of something that was always, I think, overlooked by a lot of the people in the community. And after we kind of saw the Rosendahl exhibition announcement, or the screen announcement, we saw a lot of like renewed interest in this work. So I think he's somebody that is having, especially towards the end of this year, a big push in his career, and to getting into some of these really large spaces with these really large installations, which is really awesome to see.
Yeah, I think that's really important to highlight, and really important for the space to celebrate more, is that in the lobby of MoMA, I think a bigger deal than Rafik is Raphael's work there on their 25-foot screen is a generative algorithm, and was curated and put there by Paola Antonelli. And so yeah, I think that's really important and really exciting that Raphael's work was put in MoMA, and happy that you brought that up, Conrad. And spoiler alert, but he'll be one of the first editorial pieces that comes out to start our year. But the Funny Guys, did you want to tell us about your artist of the year?
Yeah, sure. I think the easiest thing for me to do would be to emphasize the names that you guys just mentioned, because I definitely do agree with quite a few of them. Holly Herndon and Matt Dryers also immediately came to mind, like the criticism that they provide on AI technology and how deeply they engage with it is I think very unique and on a level of its own. But let me also throw in like two more names that I think really deserve emphasis at the end of 2024. And we already mentioned his name, but I'm really surprised by the amount of fantastic work that MP Cos, Michael Kozlowski, has managed to release in just 1 year. There was this, I believe the name is Empaths, of his kinetic sculpture that he sold to Canvas. That was part of a larger commission. That sculpture, again, was like a moment where the entire space like stopped for a second and just admired like the work that Michael Kozlowski released. It was very unique, especially for digital artists to release like such a fascinating physical kinetic sculpture. Then he also did the fantastic Bright Moments Finale project, which for him, as he described it to us, that was just a few hours of coding on a plane. That was not really a biggie. He just released a fantastic project quite easily, apparently. And then he also did the bokeh release at Artblocks, which, again, I think on that one, there's a lot of different opinions, but I do find it really fascinating. And I do find it fantastic to see how he explores like different mediums. These sculptures, I know they're bringing a lot of how should I say this? They're making a lot of collectors around the world like extremely happy. And then finally, maybe it's not the best pick for artist of the year necessarily, but what I also find an interesting or an important moment in 2024 is that QBB, the artist that you currently use, Conrad, as a background on your screen, that he's releasing the final Worms, the final Mimitsu pieces. And I think in the future, like we will look back, we will really smile on the period of 2021 to 2024, where QBB released hundreds of these Worms from a really unique generative system. And I think for QBB, who has been exploring the same system for decades now, 2024 definitely is a special year. And it must be really hard for him to put a point behind this series. That's something I also want to emphasize in 2024, that Mimitsu is stopping. QBB also released this fantastic book, of which you can still get an edition if you head over to highlights. Michael Kozlowski and QBB, two artists I wanted to add to the list for a shout out.
Yeah, really good choices again. And I must again shamelessly plug that I think the most recent article on Random is a big profile of QBB and looking at the end of Mimitsu. Okay, so the next topic about 2024 is events, and we wanted to highlight some of the events that we loved and also just some of the events that we participated in this year. So let me just run through the events that Random participated in. So in February, we were at Bright Moments Paris, and that was also along with NFT Paris. And then in April, we went to Bright Moments Venice as a team, as a whole team. We also, that was during the Biennale, so we got to see the Biennale together. After that, we went to Madrid together for an artist visit and some galleries there. In May was NFC Lisbon, where I got to speak. In June was Art Basel, where the Funny Guys and I got to speak. And then at the Digital Art Mile there. And then July was the Generative Art Summit in Berlin, where again, the Funny Guys and I got to speak, which was probably my highlight event of the year. Then in September, the Funny Guys and Zach went to Token 2049, where they got to chat with some of the more business side of the space. And then October was a big month. We had FemGen, where I spoke at the V&A in London. And then I also went to YCAM in Yamaguchi in Japan and spoke there. And then in November, the Funny Guys spoke at Marfa at the Art Blocks weekend. I did a little visit to Tyler Hobbs' studio that I don't know if there will ever be anything really else that comes out about that, but that was a really nice highlight of the year. Yeah, so that was some of the stuff that Random did. What is an event, it doesn't even have to be one of our events, but what is one of these events that was a highlight for you guys? What do you think, Conrad?
I think we've already talked about it a bit, but I think Bright Moments Venice was really an incredible time. Not just with how many people really came out to that time, but you mentioned like the Biennale happening at the same time. It being really the finale of Bright Moments. They had went through this 10-city cycle and kind of ending on this very, hey, we start from Venice, LA, and we go to Venice, Italy now. It really was like the perfect bow to put on the finishing present. But it was really awesome. I think there was also just exhibitions outside of Bright Moments that were really incredible. Memo Acton had a really incredible installation for the Biennale, and really getting to see kind of the intersection of both of these worlds all in this one area. And Bright Moments always does a great job of putting together events. And again, they blew it away with Venice, and having things like the Bright Moments documentary that was kind of screened at the time was really incredible to see. And it was just a really, I think one of, I guess, the most fun environments that we've got to experience so far within like this NFT space, or NFT kind of community that we have was Bright Moments Venice. I think that's definitely the highlight event of the year for me.
Yeah, Bright Moments Venice was definitely a very special moment in time, for sure. Peter and I went to the Generative Art Summit in Berlin. I think that was also a super unique moment, because that was basically a 2-day event. One day was mostly dedicated to the pioneers of the generative art movement, and the other day was more dedicated to the contemporary digital generative art fields. Like in a few years, I'll probably look back on this event as like a very unique one, because many of these pioneers, they're already quite old. Like they were creating generative art in the 60s or the 70s. Some of them have already passed away very sadly over the last years, a process that will sadly continue over the next year. So I think Generative Arts Summit Berlin, Susanne, the widow of Herbert Franke, actually really managed to capture a very special moment in time for these pioneers. Most of them were still alive, but the digital generative art space was also already a significant space, and it already exists, which was also not the case. Like it already existed a few years ago as well, but with NFTs, like there was energy in that space as well. So yeah, that was very, very unique. I was really, really grateful that we were able to be a small part of that event. And yeah, the one at Art Basel, in collaboration with Geert Bach, at the Digital Art Mile, where we organized like a generative art conference ourselves. I also really look back on that with fond memories. I think the level of discussion and engagement of the crowd and all the fantastic guests that we had at that event was very special. So for me, these two really stand out in 2024.
Yeah, I would just like to echo again the Generative Arts Summit in Berlin. I think that was probably also my favorite. That was just a really good mix of all of these pioneers, like the Funny Guys was saying, with contemporary voices and artists in the space as well. It was really unique. I don't know if anything like that can even ever happen again, but it was really special. Another one that wasn't really on that list, so not one of our events, but that Electric Dreams opening in London at the end of November. Maybe recency bias, but I thought that was really special as well, because such a big exhibition, and to see like basically all of the digital art space in London, or practically the UK, or practically Europe turn out for it was really special. So last category of 2024, which is accomplishments. Does anybody want to, we don't have to spend too much time on it, but does anybody want to mention or say an accomplishment from this year? It doesn't have to be random related. I mean, who knows? It doesn't even have to be your accomplishment, but is anybody proud of something that either they or the space achieved this year?
I mean, I think I'm just going to touch on the commissions that we've already talked about. I think what we talked about it was the year of the commissions. That was our big goal for the year, and I think I'm really happy and pretty proud of what we accomplished within this year with how many commissioned works that we gotten, and just the quality of commissioned works, and how much love we have for each of the pieces that emerged into the collection this year. It's probably, I think, what I'm going to always look back on as the fondest and and my favorite accomplishment that we were able to get done.
Yeah, on my end, I think this might sound quite abstract, but I'm quite proud of just the energy that we managed to preserve, like in 2024. Like around us, I think we've seen a lot of collectors disengage, a lot of companies, sometimes also for things beyond their control, shutting down services. But I'm quite proud as a team that we've managed to, as you mentioned, Conrad, like execute so many commissions, be so active in the markets, collecting really stellar work. At the same time, also publish a lot of incredible content on a weekly basis. Yeah, just nonstop throughout the year, while also being present at all these events. Yeah, I'm mostly proud of that. That we just bear market or not, we keep the morale high. We keep going. Like we believe in it for the long term, and we really power through the bear markets. Hopefully, assuming it has ended, might continue for a bit longer.
Yeah, definitely. I'm proud of you guys and all the collecting you've done from week to week this year. It's always been impressive to keep track of what you're doing and just the breadth of it all and how you manage to wrap your head around it, which yeah, is very tricky. In terms of personal ones, the timeline finishing was a big one for me. That happened at the end or beginning of September. That was nice to finish. On the editorial side, Yasha Reichardt, meeting her and meeting her now several times and her writing a piece for Lorandom, I think was really special and something that I'll always think of fondly and I'll always be proud of. And then yeah, I think Femgen and getting to speak at the V&A was also quite a nice moment. But yeah, that 2024. Wow, I mean, what can you say? We've talked about it for almost 80 minutes, but I mean, it deserves it. It was a year. It was a complicated year. It was a lot happened, and we were, in a lot of ways, kind of in the thick of it.
Yeah, and maybe like one other just really quick accomplishment on top, I guess on the editorial side, but I think podcast is what you call them that we were able to accomplish this year are really incredible, and it kind of comes hand in hand with the timeline finishing. But being able to have like those decade conversations with so many incredible rosters was really an awesome accomplishment. I think every time we had a new decade talk that was coming up and Peter would come to us with like the list of people that were going to be a part of it, I was like, man, this list is better than the last one. Like there's no way we get a better roster than this on the next call. And then sure enough, we seem to outdo ourselves each time, or at least Peter would outdo himself with recruiting some of the most incredible panels that we were able to kind of discuss each of these decades with. So that was a really awesome accomplishment, is just the dialogue that we were able to foster with those podcasts, I think is something that I will never forget. So
yeah, super grateful to everybody who took the time to talk to us for those artist discussions, for the timeline, and then for Electric Dreams and Electric Op, and then now for the Curator series. Yeah, that wouldn't be possible without having some really incredible people agree to offer their time and energy and expertise. And so we're very grateful for that. I mean, people don't come to listen to us, they come to listen to those guests. And yeah, we're super grateful. But yeah, good point. Thank you, Conrad. And yeah, let's look at 2025. I mean, if 2024 was wild, and I think we can all agree that it was, 2025, if by the end of 2024 and start of 2025, if there any indication, seem to possibly be ramping up the intensity. Maybe we can just start with what we're looking forward to in 2025. So I'll rattle off a couple of big ones, and then the funny guys and Conrad, maybe you can talk about individual events that you're looking forward to. So some of the big ones, in February, we have NFT Paris. March sees kind of Hong Kong and Asia get some of the attention with Art Basel and the digital art fair there. May, we think tentatively, is the maybe the Bright Moments event in Berlin. I don't know if that's confirmed. That's the rumor, right? Then there's like Arco, which is a big European fair, also in May. June is NFC in Lisbon, also Art Basel in Basel. So there's a SIGGRAPH in Vancouver, that's in August this year. And then the fall we'll have, the normal Armory, Frieze, Periphoto, those shows that are annual. So any other shows that you're looking forward to this year? It can be one of those recurring shows or any one-offs.
I'm definitely looking forward to the recurring ones. I think Art Basel in Switzerland last year was such a good experience for us. I think in general, like last year, we really saw like digital art like being taken more seriously, like during Art Basel in Switzerland, because there was not only the digital art mile, there was also all these conversations being held by the core Art Basel fair. Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to revisiting that one and hopefully again collaborating with Georg Bach on his digital art mile events. For me, Marfa this year was also very special. It was the first time I went to Marfa. I heard really good things about Marfa before. I would definitely hope to go back in 2025, and hopefully we can collaborate again with Glitch Marfa. Last year we collaborated with Bodo at a Glitch Marfa event. Who knows what 2025 may hold for us. So yeah, that's event-wise. When it comes to the recurring ones, for me, they're still looking into 2025. I still have a lot of question marks. It feels like it's hard to know exactly which ones I'm currently most excited about. Do you guys have any ones that really stand out that you really can't wait for?
There's probably not one that I'm particularly waiting on just yet. I think kind of what you mentioned, the funny guys, is it's until more of like the event info comes forward, you don't really know what you're getting yourself into. But yes, I think all like the reoccurring things always have excitement to them. I think Marfa is a really interesting one, especially when you talk about more digitally native events. Marfa is always a really special place. It's really hard to explain it to anybody who hasn't been there because it's such like this niche environment, but it seems to be kind of growing every year. And as more and more people make this kind of trek out to the desert, I think more and more stuff gets put together. And I think we saw a lot of interesting developments this year with more like kind of outside events being put together. I think one exhibition that we didn't really mention, but Clown Vamp's Junk Machine exhibition that happened at Marfa this year was really awesome to see. I think kind of this well put together, like self-curated exhibition within Marfa is really awesome. And I think seeing like more, I think we obviously have Glitch Gallery that's already out there, but I think seeing more people come in from the outside and kind of put together kind of events or host events that are outside of the art blocks events is really cool to see. And it's really becoming kind of like this mecca of generative art to some degree, or at least mecca of art blocks that people really kind of come out to. But I think maybe to kind of move away from like events that we're looking forward to, I think as a collection lead, there's always works that I'm looking forward to. And I think one that is really recently kind of coming to the forefront is Cycles by the Material Protocol Arts team, which is led by Matto and others. But that's a really interesting project, and it's really exploring this idea of kind of this on-chain sculpture, like worldwide sculpture project. And I think this visually, the project is really intriguing, and then technically the project is really intriguing while kind of exploring the ideas of space and time and kind of using these lenses to capture certain moments within the system and being able to like lock these moments to your piece is something I'm really looking forward to. And Matto has some really great videos that kind of dive into the project a bit more on their Twitter page. But something that I'm really looking forward to, especially at the start of this year. I think maybe by the time this video is out, some of the first cycle pieces will actually be on chain. So that's something that I've really been anticipating really since it's been announced. So that's one project that I can't wait for, and just a few more days until we see those come to life. So
yeah, definitely really good choices. In addition to some of the other ones that I mentioned, ones that I'm looking forward to this year, one that is interesting is called Machine Love at Mori Art Museum in Tokyo. I think it opens in February or middle of February. It opens up pretty soon. The full title is Machine Love, Video Game, AI, and Contemporary Art. So it's this AI and generative AI and video game and virtual world exhibition at Mori Art Museum. So I think that'll be a fun show. It's open, I think February to June. So that would be, if you're in Tokyo, I think that'll be a really interesting show to make. Can go on to the next topic, which is we've talked a lot about art and mercifully, but maybe we could talk a bit about markets and crypto as well, and kind of peek into our crystal balls on that area, or at least give some of our opinions there. So how about the funny guys? What do you think about 2025 and crypto and its implications for art and the art scene?
Yeah, good question, Peter. I think 2024 was definitely a very politics heavy year. And I'm quite happy that the US election is behind us, because for months on end, that was really taking over the timeline, and not always for the better. But I do think it's effects that a more pro crypto friendly government is going to take place in 2025. One thing that was really interesting, I think, in 2024 was hearing a lot of founders from the crypto world talk about the struggles that they had in the regulatory environment over the last years. I was listening to Net Emodi from Highlights on the Waiting to Be Signed podcast. He was also mentioning that Highlights had often been debanked without proper notice, without any reasons why they lost their bank accounts. And I do hope for crypto startups, especially the ones that are active in the digital art fields, that hopefully these regulatory concerns are behind them moving forward. Hopefully, because many of these people, as we know, all these people have good intentions. They're really trying to help digital artists release and sell their work. And if there's no positive regulatory environment for them to operate in, everything becomes so much more difficult. So that's definitely, I think, a positive moving forward. But what that exactly means for the digital art world, I think it's a bit, it's hard to know. Because on the other hand, I also worry a bit that crypto is being claimed by one certain part of the political spectrum, and that may not always be positive. I hope for artists that engage with blockchain, that engage with cryptocurrency, I hope it doesn't necessarily come with a political leaning. I hope people do see these choices as something apolitical, and these are artists just using modern technologies to release their work, but not necessarily that they are subscribing to a certain political leaning. Because as we know from our chat with Rafael Lozano Hammer, for many traditional artists, this is definitely a reason for them to not engage with blockchain, to not engage with NFTs. So there's pros and cons, I think, to the shifting political environment, but hopefully the pros outweigh the cons moving into 2025.
Yeah, I really agree and resonate with, I think, everything you said there, the funny guys. I think specifically to the political alignment of crypto and kind of this preconceived notion that anybody in crypto maybe aligns himself politically one way or the other, whereas I think maybe if you look at the start of crypto, that idea would maybe even be flipped. But yeah, I hope that's something that as we move into 2025, maybe we can discern ourselves from a bit more. I think that'd be really beneficial for the space. And then also what you talk about with just the regulation of crypto, and it being such a gray area because there's really no standardized approach to how things are supposed to be. Yeah, I hope that regulatory issues get resolved and we have a better standing there, and that'd be really beneficial for the space.
Yeah, I definitely agree that regulatory clarity is something that's needed in the space. I mean, I don't know if necessarily 2025 is the year that it happens, but you would hope that there is going to be movement in a positive direction there. It's something I've been thinking a lot about. There's this article that came out actually about this time last year, so it's not new, but it's called The Three Body Problem, and it's by Sam Hart and some other people, and it's about how the unregulated space of crypto and it's the combination of code and markets and social norms, and how none of it is regulated leads to challenges and instability, and you can see that bleeding through into the art market and the art scene as well. And so regulation might help. I'll have a piece coming out pretty soon, I think either in January or February, about that 3 body problem and how it relates to art. But it's something that I think is really interesting for the start of 2025 is we seem to be at the space where museums are paying attention, but they still have certain things that they're skeptical of. And I think this is an important opportunity to address some of those issues. We're here calling for more regulations in crypto, but I think there's a big chunk of the crypto space that would not want more, or is in vehement disagreement that anarchic or libertarian side of the space. So yeah, I'm interested to see also, and I would presume that they would be more of the Trump aligned side as well. So I'm curious how they would think about regulations, and if they agree with us that they're needed for the space to move forward. But yeah, it's really complicated. That paper is still being written and still in process. But moving on to maybe crypto and how it might affect just crypto art in general. I mean, it's so hard to say that. I would very much hesitate to say that this will be like a bull year, but I mean, that does seem to be what the consensus is, which is maybe a little worrying, but people do expect that. And if that were to be the case, I mean, that would be presumably a positive thing for first crypto art and then hopefully more generative and in AI art, I would imagine. Possibly AI art getting the bulk of that attention and generative, but it's so hard to say, like you said, Conrad. And then also 2025 is supposed to be the year of quantum. So let's see if that, if anything actually comes of that.
Being the year of quantum is like, it's a funny term. It's like, I always think like people were really interested in generative art, and then like kind of that Toy Story meme of like, I'm done playing with you. And like he throws Andy on the floor, is like people are done with generative art and they want AI art now. And like, what if like quantum art comes and people are like, I'm done with AI art, I want quantum art, because it's like this new cutting edge term that like it really infatuates people for whatever reason coming in the future. But yeah, I think if it is like the year of the bull market, it's always interesting to try to theorize like where that might go, where that bull market money might trickle down, because usually I think most people agree that the NFT market somewhat lags behind crypto prices to some degree, whereas like we'll see a big spike in Ethereum and Bitcoin, but it won't be until maybe a couple months we start to see that kind of natural effect or that kind of shockwave effect hitting like the NFT markets and digital art markets. But it's always tough to predict like where that market is going to be situated. But I think you're pretty spot on, Peter, with AI being the main highlight. I think that is what grabs the most people attention. I think there still will be a few people that try to go back to maybe what happened before and that see some renewed interest in older projects. But again, I think this harkens back to kind of the more mature audience. Like people know what they really like. So I think once they get maybe some more liquidity in their hands, they probably go back and hunt for artists that they really appreciate nowadays that they maybe weren't able to collect back then. So I think we'll probably see, it'll be a good indication on like which artists really grew within the bear market if a bull market comes, by seeing like how much kind of renewed interest is in their past work. I think will be a cool indication, but you never know if it's going to be a bear or bull market. I guess the only insight I can provide is that, yeah, 2024 is probably a year of like a rebound a bit. But yeah, I think looking at the end of 2024, things look relatively okay. Again, it's hard to always think if we're going to get back to that end of 2021 mania, but yeah, always keep your fingers crossed for that.
One thing that's really interesting and that I wanted to bring up too about just moving forward and where we might be on more of a historical time frame is just thinking. So earlier, I've been reading this book, so it's taken me, I guess, multiple days. I'm not reading it all at once, but like I'm reading this book by Domenico Quaranta. It's called Beyond New Media Art, and it came out in 2013, so 10 years ago, and it doesn't mention AI at all. It doesn't mention artificial intelligence essentially at all. A book about new media art and new media art's history just from 10 years ago doesn't almost, it barely mentions it. I think he talks about Cohen. I think that the whole AI history, the whole integrating AI and its developments into digital art history and just into art history, it hasn't been done at all. And that research is still going on, and figuring out what's important historically and what will be important in the future. We are still like right in the middle of it. It's like if we were in the end of the 60s or whatever with computer art and digital art. So we're at this really interesting and kind of chaotic time, and maybe 2025 will be a step towards taking a breath and seeing historically what's important, and getting some of that more academic research done on some of this history, which genuinely hasn't been done yet. It's really interesting. People collecting now are really in sort of the Wild West, and are in a really interesting position to be able to shape those narratives, but also still discover. I think we'll move on to our last topic of the talk, and it's just about goals of 2025, or goals for this year, for us individually, or for the team, or for Lorandom, or for the space. What are we looking forward to in terms of what we can contribute to the year? So what do you guys think?
Yeah, for me it's again quite abstract, but I really hope in 2025 that with Lorandom we can also explore new avenues. I think we found like a really interesting territory, like with our collection, with all the content we are producing. But yeah, I hope to also explore, and at the moment it's still abstract, because I hope, like, of course we'll do it together as a team, and we'll think about new things that we can try in 2025. But yeah, that's something I want to put a lot of emphasis on in 2025, that we also explore new things and engage with like recent developments in technology or in the generative art markets. That can be through collaborations, maybe with other entities in the ecosystem, maybe things that we explore on our own. I hate to sound so abstract, but that's only because it hasn't really been conceptualized like fully yet. But in 2025, by the end of the year, we have done some new things that we maybe cannot imagine yet at the start of 2025, but that's definitely a mindset I want to enter 2025 in, for us to explore and engage with new technologies.
Yeah, I think for 2025, we always talk about 2024 was the year of commissions. I think 2025, I hope, is kind of the year of activations. I think after spending a couple of years, like finally building out a pretty substantial collection within Lorandom, we have a lot of material that we could put together to form some really great exhibitions or shows, or just activating pieces and really unique experiences. Would be really exciting for 2025. And then also on top of that, I think preservation, I hope, would take a bigger stance in 2025. I know this may be, I guess, a bit maybe cynical to say or something, but I kind of hope that we see a few kind of disaster cases where we see like NFTs that are lost more in this year, just so that it maybe pushes people to think about it a bit more. And I think get better at having better artist practices and better approaches to how works are minted on chain. So we have like maybe a better long-term outlook on how things are meant to take place. And having people like Regina is really awesome, and her being at the forefront of like, hey, yeah, I've been looking into digital preservation for a long time. Here are some of the tips. I think as more and more people become aware of this and more people talk about it, it's only become less of an issue, I guess, because I think it's something that a lot of people don't think about today, or if they do think about it, it's really just the topic of, IPFS or anything else. Like there's really not enough deep diving done into the topic of preservation and making sure that the works that are created and the culture that's created today is being able to be experienced decades from now. We don't just want to be a flash in the timeline, and that gets killed by data rot or broken links or broken systems. Like we want to make sure that we can lay out the foundation that we can continue building and continue to be able to look back at these experiences in all of its glory.
Yeah, preservation is a really good point, and something I also had on my list. So for me, for 2025, I've got a couple of projects that are more long-term that we're hoping to see, if not be realized in 2025, then move along significantly. So that includes the timeline and making it into a book, and a physical book, and potentially another book idea that I have that I'm also kind of working on and reaching out to people about. So looking forward to that. Really looking forward to, and it's one of the first pieces that I'm going to write about, and it's something I've written about before, but about integration into the mainstream or traditional ecology and art space, and kind of moving away from separateness of this space and the separateness of the NFT or Web3 world, and those ideas and topics and are not only going to motivate me, but also are things that I want to write about this year. This is also kind of vague, but just AI, I want to continue leaning into it. It was a goal last year too, but yeah, I mean, I don't think, yeah, it's silly to say that that's going to be a goal for this year, but yeah, just want to reiterate that it will continue to be something that I'm curious about, and I think we all are. And then, yeah, then just some community topics like Conrad mentioned, preservation. I think that when we did that talk with Regina and John Appolido, Regina Harsani, that it struck a bit of a nerve with the community, and that it got people interested in preservation, and it got people talking about it. And it certainly feels like there's more there to explore and to discuss, but we haven't really gotten around to it for for any number of reasons. But definitely in 2025, hopefully we can get back to that. I would like to chat with people like Michael and Dragon from Rhizome, but in general, just continue to have that conversation and provide resources and just have it be something that people think about, because it, like Conrad said, it is something very important. And then something also important is onboarding. And I mean, if we do think that 2025 we'll see new entrants into the space, then what is Lorandom's role in onboarding and for helping some of these entrants learn about generative art and doing it in the most efficient but comprehensive way. So trying to think about how to get people that are interested in generative art, how to get them interested, but also educated, and telling them something, but maybe not too much. And so those are things that I also want to think about this year, just facilitating getting people excited and interested about generative art if we are going to see new people enter the space in 2025. Is there anything that you guys want to say to wrap up before we shut it down?
Just in general, I do think it's going to be a great year, guys. I'm really excited for it. I think 2024 was one with its challenges, but at the end, we saw some sparks of energy returning into the space. Most of the players are still around. We're seeing continued innovation. We're already looking ahead to some very exciting projects into the new year. Yeah, I'm just really excited for 2025. I think it's going to be a great one for digital arts and for the random. So yeah, thank you guys a lot for this conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I guess final topic is just excitement for the future. You never know what's going to happen. I think a lot of the things that we talked about in this chat regarding 2024, like I could have never predicted what have happened, whether that's an event-wise or a project-wise or a certain work or a certain artist that I was really excited about. Like, you never know what's going to happen. The future is always changing. So just excited for the anticipation of what is to come, even if I don't know what that may be. It's always exciting to be in the space that's ever changing.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen 2024 saw institutional interest rise while kind of public interest maybe waned a bit. And let's see what that dynamic is, and if they can be more aligned, or if that misalignment continues. That'll be something that I'm very interested in. But yeah, can't wait for the year, can't wait to start the year, can't wait for everything that it holds. And yeah, thank you, gentlemen, very much for the chat, and looking forward to continue it for the next 11 to 12 months.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. And thanks everyone for listening in.
Thank you, guys.
Definitely.